had a heart attack and was taken to the hospital. And while on the operating table, she had a near-death experience. Seeing God in her near-death experience, she asked, "Is my time up?" And God said, "No, you have another 43 years, 2 months and 8 days to live." Upon hearing this, she was so excited that she decided to stay in the hospital a little longer, and she had a facelift, liposuction, and a tummy tuck. She even had someone come in and change the color of her hair, since she had so much time to live and that God obviously had a plan for her. She figured she'd make the most of it. She was released from the hospital, and while crossing the street on her way home, she was hit by a bus and died. Arriving at the front of God at the pearly gates, she said, "I thought you said I have another 43 years. Why didn't you pull that bus out from my path?" God replied, "I didn't even recognize you." We have a question today. Has there been a time in your life when you've seen a plan of God unfold? Kind of a deeper question, and so we're going to give you a minute to think about it. If you're new to Lighthouse, if you'd like to answer it, you can stand up, and Brock will bring the mic around for you to answer. Has there been a time in your life, might be a big way, might be a little way, where you have seen the plan of God unfold? That was quick.
Okay, there we go. This is probably a really easy one for me. When my son passed away, it was from alcohol poisoning. And I'll never forget the police saying that they had to meet with the public and broadcasters and all that kind of stuff to talk about what had happened because it was so tragic. And they said, "Well, do you want to talk?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And they said, "No, you don't understand. You don't have to." And I said, "No, you don't understand. I have to get up and talk. Because if I don't say something, this is going to be a tradition that will continue with young kids." And I never realized what all of that meant until I was in the middle of it. And because of Jason's death, we've had so much change in the community about alcohol and training of servers and all kinds of things. But God put so many speaking opportunities in my life. Not once did I ever reach out to people. I had been interviewed by CNN and did a program and Dateline and all kinds of programs that I never would have thought, but that we reached out to the whole nation with Jason's message about alcohol. And I never dreamt in a million years, but I always knew that God was standing right beside me and holding me up and giving me the strength to speak about what happened in our family. And never in a million years would I have ever expected an experience like that to come out of a death of a child.
Thank you, Ann. For those who don't know, Jason died on what was called the Power Hour back some years ago, and that experience has now stopped in our community, thanks to your work. Good job. Anybody else? You don't have to top that, don't worry. You don't have to have been on CNN to. Anybody else?
Hi. The day that Dale called me, this wasn't even a church yet. He had started a recovery Bible study in their home, Beth and Dale. And that day was the beginning of something truly wonderful for me. My life has changed. I've met a lot of great friends. I have a family here. Today is my last regular Sunday. We're moving next weekend. So I'll miss all of you. But that phone call changed my life. Thank you.
And it's brought you here too, which you've made a difference here. Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, for me, it was when I was deciding if I should leave my old church or not, but I was really afraid to because I was afraid I wouldn't get confirmed and all that stuff. But then when I started, even though I was the only one, it was a lot better than when I went with like a ton of other kids. So yeah, that was pretty changing and good.
Thanks, Sophie. Anybody else? There we go.
I've seen God unfolding His plans, His dreams in our life. Our family has gone through some significant trials with our daughter, and enough so that she had to be taken away from us for a while to get better. But this is a little girl that has a extreme heart for God. And as a 3-year-old, she saw an accident and said, we need to stop and pray for that person. And she said, it's okay, God said He'll take care of the person now. And as a 7-year-old, each of my children I would take for a weekend and do just a mom-child weekend with. And for her, at 7 years old, she said, my other children went to a hotel for the weekend. My daughter said, I'd like to go to Jerusalem and follow the journey of Jesus. And so she just has always had a heart for God, and I think Satan attacks those that are the strongest in belief. And she went through some severe struggles, but this year she was asked to speak at the Dakota Boys and Girls Ranch fundraiser. And there was a family there going through similar circumstances, and they wanted to pull their daughter from the program. And because of Juanita's words, they're keeping their daughter there for help. And also Juanita was able to help raise $77,000 for a chapel for the Dakota Boys and Girls Ranch here in town. And so even though there's a lot of struggle, God's paving the way and using it for good in His plan.
Thank you, Tammy. It's awesome. We'll take a second if there's one more, if anybody else wants to share. All right, we have a video for you as we get started with our teaching message. Well, if you've been with us over the last almost 2 months, our walk with Joseph comes to an end. We've learned that Joseph's life, Joseph of the Old Testament, was a lot like ours. He had ups and downs. He had difficult times and high times. And he had alone times, and he had times filled with meaning. You perhaps remember now that Joseph, who was the favorite of his father, was sold into slavery by his brothers. He ended up in Egypt. He had ups and downs in Egypt. He became, with other things, an interpreter of dreams. And he had interpreted a dream for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, about 7 coming years of prosperity that would be followed by 7 years of famine. And because of his interpretation, Pharaoh had put Joseph in charge of all of the economy, all of the food. And last week we read about Joseph's brothers coming to him in Egypt to get some food. And these were the same brothers who had one day beaten up Joseph and sold him into slavery. They didn't recognize Joseph at first, and eventually Joseph revealed himself to them. And I want to go back and read a verse or two that we looked at last week, and then I want to share a little bit about these verses and God's plan for our lives with you this morning. So if you have a Bible, turn to Genesis 45. Genesis chapter 45. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. Chapters are the big numbers, the verses are the little numbers. And in chapter 45, verse 5, Joseph is telling his brothers after he's revealed himself to them, he says, "But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives." Kind of a statement of faith. You know, yes, you beat me up. Yes, you sold me into slavery, but God had sent me here ahead of you for this day. Skip down to verse 8. "So it was God who sent me here, not you." Kind of an interesting statement when you think about it. Now turn a couple of pages later to chapter 50, verse 20. And what's happening here is Joseph and his brother's father, Jacob, has died. So now the brothers think, now that dad's dead, he's going to get some revenge. And Joseph says in chapter 50, verse 20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good." Read that with me one time. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good." It's an incredible statement of faith when you think about it. You know, if I had $1 for every time that someone said, "Dale, how do I know God's plan for my life?" I'd be retired now. It's a question that we ask again and again in our lives. Or sometimes we ask it in a different way. You know, I've been through a very difficult time in my life. Was that God's plan for me to go through that difficult time? Now I want to talk with you about how God's plan works, I think, and how God's plan doesn't work this morning. Often we think that God has this big plan all laid out for us, all the steps that we're supposed to take, but He keeps it hidden so that we're going to have trouble finding it. Kind of like a divine hide and seek. And we keep thinking, you know, if I just keep looking hard enough, I'm going to find God's plan for my life. And then we think, but if I miss it, if I take the wrong step, if I pick the wrong path, somehow my life is going to be lost. I wonder if you've ever thought about it in this fashion. If everything if every step is planned out for you in your life, if God has a plan of everything that's supposed to take place in your life, do you really think that He'd leave it up to you to figure out? In our troubles, we begin to wonder, is God planning this out for us? Is God punishing me for what I'm going through? It's interesting because oftentimes what happens is we go through a lot of our life not really thinking that much about God, and then when something bad happens, we think about God a lot. God, why are you doing this to me? Now, all those kinds of different thoughts about God's plan for our life that I just shared with you, I've thought in my own life. Most of you know my story. It was just about 2 years ago when I was kind of forced into the reality that I needed to deal with some issues in my own life. One being an addiction with alcohol, and another being depression and professional burnout. And I asked all those same questions as I came through that time. God, did you cause this? Were you punishing me for something? And I came to the conclusion that that's not necessarily how God works. And yet I also came to the conclusion that God knew what was going on. And God even knew what was coming. So how does that all fit together? And here's the answer. It's a deep mystery. I have no idea. I have no idea. What I do know is that in faith, we are able to look back at our life and we're able to see that, yes, indeed, God did have a plan at that time. Yes, indeed, God was with me during that time. Yes, indeed, God was working. Yes, indeed, God had not abandoned me, and that God has brought something new. You know, one of the profound things about the Serenity Prayer, we had a series on the Serenity Prayer last year. One of the profound things I think about it is not that beginning part that many of you have memorized, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change things I can, wisdom to know the difference. It's actually what comes after that, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. Not looking at hardship as just something that eventually will result in peace. It's the way I get to peace in my life, is going through hardship. And so, one of the things that I came to conclude in my own journey was, and these words from Genesis chapter 50 were important. I came to conclude that what I did to screw up my own life, God intended for good. What I intended, or didn't even intend, to cause in my own struggles and journey, God intended it for good. How does God have a plan from your life? It's not hidden. It's just that we don't see life in the same way that God sees it. I have a picture on the screen right now, and it's a lighthouse. You can really find a lot of lighthouse pictures when you start looking. And the interesting thing about this picture is, you see, to you it looks like it's all kind of broken up, almost like a jigsaw puzzle, right? Well, the reason it looks like that is that if you go to the next picture, that lighthouse picture is made up of little pictures of lighthouses. And so, if in fact what you see here is just one little tiny spot on that picture. Go to the next slide again. You can see it's kind of down towards the base of that lighthouse. And the reason why I think this picture is so profound is because you and I go through our life and we see our little lighthouse. We see our little spot. But God sees this whole picture. We get so caught up in what I'm going through today, what I went through yesterday, or what might come tomorrow, that we don't really see that God has this master picture and plan that He looks at in your life and in mine. And the reality is that we can often go through life, and you heard some testimonies about it earlier, we can go through life not realizing that God is actually, not necessarily planning out each step that I'm taking, but that God is actually using what's going on in my life to make something new or something good or to even bring about a miracle. I mean, just think about some of the things that you heard. Lives have literally been saved because Anne spoke about her son's death. It would have been much easier for her to just turn in on herself and say, what is God doing to me? I could go around and pick out some of the other stories too. See, God sees a larger picture, and He doesn't necessarily map out every step that we're going to take, but somehow in a mysterious way that you're never going to understand on this side of the eternity, God is working for good. God is working for good. And even sometimes what we intend in our own free will to do to screw up our life, or we don't intend, but it still leads to struggles, God is intending it for good. So, what is God's plan for your life? How do you answer that? Well, I think the best way to answer it is to look at your life in kind of a three-dimensional way. First of all, God has spiritually gifted you in some fashion. You are unique. Some of you are really unique. You are gifted to do things that only you can do. And I am just continually amazed at the giftedness of people. For example, look at this. I couldn't have come up with this. Some people have a spiritual gift of being able to view an empty space and say, you know what, we could make that beautiful. One of the people who I've come to appreciate in his spiritual giftedness, actually there's several, but I think of this person in particular because of his answer to a question one day, and it's Scott Singer sitting way back in the corner. Scott has abilities that some of you have that I don't have to do things, to get things done, to work, and the reason I think of that is because one day we were in a discussion where we said, what would be your ideal job? And we had all sorts of interesting questions. Mine was to be the host of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I'd love that job. You know what Scott's answer was? You remember what your answer was? What was it? Your first answer was, I'd like to be on dirty jobs. Yeah, that's the same thing. Get to do a little bit of everything. I can't do that, but Scott can do that. We all have different gifts. What is your spiritual giftedness? What is it that literally God put you on this earth to do? And then, where has God planted you? Where has God planted you? And finally, how can you use your giftedness and your place in life to somehow serve Him? I think that as we look back at our life, we can look back and see God's hand at work. But while you're going through it, it's very, very hard to see exactly what God's necessarily up to. And we can look in the future and say, well, in faith, I'm going to move forward, but I'm not exactly sure where God is leading us. But what we do know is that we've got today. We've got today. And today, you can use your spiritual giftedness and the place that God has put you in to somehow do His will. I am reading a great book that I picked up a little while ago. The book title is The Me That I Want to Be, and it's by John Ortberg. Most of you know who that is. It's one of my favorite authors. And in the book, he tells the story. He says, Joshua Bell is perhaps the world's finest violinist. His parents knew he was something special when he was only 4 years old, and he stretched rubber bands to his dresser drawers and played classical tunes on them. It's kind of weird when you think about it. Adjusting their pitch by pulling the drawers in and out. As an experiment, he recently played, unannounced, in a metro station in Washington, D.C. The people who conducted this experiment were warned by experts that a crowd would certainly gather. They might need extra security. Surely many people would flock to this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Joshua Bell brought his 1713, the year 1917-13, Stradivarius violin, which cost millions of dollars. And he began to play the 6 most beautiful songs in his repertoire. The world's greatest violinist playing the world's greatest music on the world's greatest instrument, and no one stopped. Thousands of people walked by. You can even see it on video. Children would tug on their parents' sleeves, but adults were too preoccupied. One woman alone recognized him and stopped to listen. She gave him a bigger tip, $20, than the other thousands of people who had come by, put all together. They were in a hurry, hurrying past Joshua Bell because they had other things to do. He writes, Jesus says, "To what can I compare this generation? We played the flute for you, and you did not dance." The master is still playing, but listening is optional. Those who have ears to hear, let them hear. See, I think that we ask the wrong question, to tell the truth. Sometimes we are looking so hard into the future, wondering about God's plan, that we actually miss what God is doing in our lives today. Sometimes we are so caught up in ourselves, in the busyness of our life, in the day in and day out work that we do, that we miss God's presence in the moment. Or sometimes we are so hung up on the past, wondering, where was God in that struggle, that we don't see the miracle of what it is that He's doing today. You want to know God's will for your life? Take a moment right now and listen. You want to know God's will for your life? Take a moment right now and say, "Thank you, God, for all that you've given me." You want to know God's will for your life? Take a moment of silence for a change. Now, I'm not saying that God doesn't care about the next 20 years of your life. I'm not saying that I understand completely where God was in your past. What I'm saying is, don't get caught up in those so much that you miss what God is doing today. That's really all we can know, is what God is doing right now, right here, today. So the question, where was God in that, in many ways is the wrong question, I think. The question is, what is God up to today? This is God's plan today. And it's today that we are here for. I want to share a couple other things from this book that I'm reading. Ortberg writes, "Here's a great secret of the Bible. Your longing to become all that you were meant to be is a tiny echo of God's longing to begin the new creation. The rabbis spoke of this as tikkun olam, to fix the world. The more concerned you are about your own fulfillment, the less fulfilled you will be when your life is devoted to yourself, it is as small as a grain of wheat. When your life is given to God, however, it is as if that grain is planted in rich soil, growing into part of a much bigger project. What is Ortberg saying? Ortberg saying is that too often what happens is that we get so caught up in thinking about God's plan for our life that we get so caught up in ourselves. It becomes, how am I going to find the fulfilling life that God has planned for me? And he's saying the Bible teaches something different. You want the fulfilling life God has planned for you, stop thinking about yourself all of the time. Start thinking about other people. Start thinking about the goodness that God has already provided around you. It tells an awesome story in the book. Took one too many pages. It says, not long ago I boarded an airport shuttle bus to get to the rental car lot. Everybody's done that, right? Driving a shuttle bus is usually a thankless job, for the driver is often regarded as the low man on the totem pole. People on the bus are often grumpy from travel and in a hurry to get to their car. No one says much except the name of the rental car company, but not on this bus. This man who drove this bus was an absolute delight. He was scanning the curbside, looking for anybody who needed a ride. You know, he told us, I'm always looking because sometimes people are running late. You can tell it in their eyes. I'm always looking because I never want to miss anyone. Hey, here's another one, he said. Driver pulled over to pick up a latecomer, and he was so excited about what he was doing that we all got excited. We were actually cheering him on when he was able to pick up another person. We're actually cheering him on for picking up people. It was like watching Jesus drive the shuttle bus. The man would grab people's luggage before they could lift it, and then he would jump back on the bus and say, well, we're off. I know you're all eager to get there as quickly as possible, so I'm going to get you there as soon as I can. Jaded commuters put down their papers. He created such a little community of joy on that bus that people wanted to ride around in the terminal a second time just to hang out with this guy. We would say to people who got on after us, got to watch this guy. He wasn't just our shuttle bus driver, he was our leader and our friend. And for a few moments, community flourished on a shuttle bus for a rental car company, and one person moved towards the best version of himself. What happened to that shuttle bus driver, Ortberg writes, can happen to you. Sometimes it does. Every once in a while you do something that surprises you, and you catch a glimpse of the person that you were made to be. You say something inspirational at a meeting. You help a homeless man no one else notices. You are patient with a rambunctious 3-year-old. You lose yourself in a piece of music. You fall in love. You express compassion. You stand up to a bully. You freely make a sacrificial gift. You fix an engine. You forgive an old hurt. You say something you would normally never say, or you keep from saying something that you would normally blurt out. As you do, you glimpse for a moment why God made you. Only God knows your full potential, and He is guiding you towards the best version of yourself all the time. He has many tools and is never in a hurry. That can be frustrating for us, but even in our frustration, God is at work to produce patience in us. He never gets discouraged by how long it takes. He delights every time you grow. Only God can see the best version of you, and He is more concerned with your reaching your full potential than even you are. What is God's plan for your life? Well, see, He's kind of working on you as you go. Problem is, you need to take a moment to actually see Him at work once in a while. And so today is the day. Not yesterday. Don't worry so much about God's plan yesterday. Not sure if you'll even have it tomorrow, but today is the day. Find joy in what you're doing today. Look to see God's blessing in this day. And so I was just thinking for a moment about what that looks like in your life. I'm not sure what the rest of your day looks like, but chances are you're going to eat something in a little while. Maybe chew a little slower and actually taste the goodness of what God has given you today. You might watch football. Thank God that God has planted in you a competitive spirit and one who actually enjoys to be entertained. Some of you might come to our Al-Anon group tonight, our first meeting, and if you do, come with an open spirit that God actually cares enough about you and your loved ones that you can come together as a group of people to find encouragement and hope. Some of you might come to our recovery group tonight. Come with an open spirit and realizing that maybe God has brought you to that moment, to that time tonight, through all of your journey because you have something to share that actually may change the life of another person. Lots of you are going to have to get up tomorrow morning and you're going to have to go to work. We all like to say we hate Monday mornings. Or you're going to have to get up and you're going to have to go to school. And instead maybe get up tomorrow morning and drive to work and think, man, I got a job. You know, not everybody has a job today. I get to do things that God has actually gifted me to do and people pay me to do it. Or maybe I don't really like what I'm doing, but I got a job and I get a paycheck and there might be another plan for me, but for today, it's enough. Tomorrow morning, if you're married, look at your spouse and say, you know what? I love you. God is so good that He has given me you. Not everybody gets to share life in the same way as you and your spouse. If you've got a good friend, call him up. Encourage them. Thank God that you have people who care about you. I was thinking about the whole church dynamic and how we all come here and we kind of especially those of us who grew up in the church, we got to do the church thing. I was watching Sunday school teachers. One of the best marketing things for our Sunday school teachers, Kirk and I were talking about it, we have as many teachers as we have students right now. 1-on-1 ratio. I don't know if you think about it when you come here, those of you who are working with kids, that you actually have the privilege of representing Jesus to young people who are soaking it up. Man, there is no greater vocation in life than teach kids about Jesus. Those of you who make coffee or who help clean the building, man, you're getting to do something for Jesus so that people who are not connected into a community, for people who don't necessarily have a spiritual foundation, or people who are looking for a message of hope can come and be greeted warmly and handed a cup of coffee and a goodie. Man, you're getting to clean a building so that somebody can actually meet Jesus here. If you've set up communion this morning, you're not just setting up communion. We believe that Jesus actually touches us with His grace when we receive Him in the bread and the grape juice in just a few moments. You are doing something profound. What an opportunity. Man, I wish everybody in this world had an opportunity to actually set up something so miraculously and powerful as you had this morning. If you ushered people, do you know that most people decide on a church when they first walk in by how they're greeted? You're actually getting to welcome people in a way as Jesus would welcome them as they come into His church. You get to do it all for Jesus. You have been created in God's image. You have been gifted. You have been placed here. You have been redeemed. You have been called and you have been sent. And don't get so caught up in looking at the big picture And don't get so caught up in looking at just your little lighthouse that you miss the fact that God is actually working in between. That God is working in your life. That you've been meant to thrive in this life. That you've been meant to serve in this life. And that whatever is in the past, God intended for good. Whatever is in the future is only in His hands. But what is today is your opportunity to encounter Him. Amen? Amen? Come on. Amen. All right. Sarah?
In the night in which he was betrayed, our Lord Jesus took bread and gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body given for you."